If you've ever wondered how much humidity you should be giving your plant, or what humidifier is even worth buying, or why do our plants need humidity in the first place, Kaylin also asked that, so consider this your personal one-on-one too. Office hours are open, so get comfortable and let's talk. So let's talk about what humidity actually is and why our plants need it. So humidity is water vapor in the air, and our houseplants need it because a lot of them naturally grow in tropical regions, and when we bring them into our homes are a lot more drier because we're running the air conditioning, we're running the heat, seasonal changes, or just the climate that we live in doesn't naturally align with what they are used to, and it can still stress our plants out even if we're doing everything else right, and that stress can show up as crispy edges or the leaves are not unfurling properly. Now, before we get into ways in which you can raise the humidity, or if you even need to do so, let's talk about what you currently have, which is called ambient humidity. Now, the ambient humidity are the natural levels in our home, and this can change throughout the year because of the seasons, our climate, the region, heat, air conditioning. There are a lot of factors, and the way you can read this is getting a hygrometer, or a lot of times our thermometers have a reading, at least mine does, where it tells me what the humidity is in my home at all times. Now, most homes sit at around 30 to 40% depending on where you live, but our plants would really love probably 50 to 60% and upwards to really be able to feel as though they're in their natural habitat. And that's what we're doing in our homes. We are mimicking what they would naturally grow in to help them thrive the best in our environment. Because again, remember, they grow out in the wild and they're very much used to a different climate than what we usually have inside. So let's talk about ways that plants communicate that they want more humidity. One is holes in their leaves. Anthuriums are notorious for this, especially in those new leaves when they are pushing them out and they're expanding and hardening. If you are seeing tears in those leaves, more than likely they want more humidity as they are doing that, because their leaves start off this small and they're expanding to be this big sometimes, or even bigger. And when those tissues are tight and there's not enough moisture that they can pull from in the air to help just expand those leaves more smoothly, it will tear and create holes that are not repairable. They're going to be permanent in those leaves. But that's one way that plants communicate, is those holes. I mean, at least if it's not any pests present. The other two ways, as I mentioned earlier in the video, are crispy edges, or the new leaves not being able to unfurl properly. So sometimes they may get stuck. Then you're having to try and manipulate. You really don't want to do that either. But if there's not enough moisture in the air for it to pull from to smoothly do that, you will see signs show up that it's time to raise the humidity. But definitely the crispy edges on a lot of our tropical loving plants is a telltale sign. Now let's talk about some solutions to raise the humidity. My number one being a humidifier, and I'll get into what to look for in a humidifier, but that is a guaranteed way, in my opinion, to raise the humidity. Some other ways that you may hear about are pebble trays, and I wouldn't say that it raises the humidity enough. It could do something, but not to the extent of what plants would really want. Another, I would say, effective way is grouping plants together. With all the moisture in their substrate that you're growing them in, or on their leaf surfaces, they create their own ecosystem and can raise the humidity around them just by grouping them together. If you think about what it's like in a jungle or a rainforest, all of those plants are growing together and creating their own ecosystem, and it's the same thing in our homes if we were to group them together. Another way is setting up a greenhouse in your home. You can do this by using IKEA glass cabinets. You'll see a lot of plant parents converting those into greenhouse setups. They add grow lights, and because it is enclosed, it naturally keeps in all of that moisture, raising the humidity inside, making it a great environment for plants to grow in. Of course, our plants tend to outgrow those very fast because we are mimicking what they are naturally used to and love, but it is a great way to grow some of those plants that really do need a lot more humidity than our homes are able to give. Now, as I mentioned, a humidifier is my number one choice in raising the humidity in your home. And there's a lot of options on the market. So looking for a humidifier can be a little overwhelming, but these are things that I look for when I am buying my humidifiers. One being a humidity sensor. There are humidifiers that have built-in sensors that can sense what the humidity is in the room that it's in. And with that sensor, you can set it to automatically raise the humidity when it drops to a certain level. So for example, if the humidity is 50% in this room and I set my humidifier to raise it to 60%, well, once it raises it to 60%, it'll cut off. And if it drops below that in the room, then the humidifier will turn back on to pump out more moisture into the air to raise it back up again. So having that is a non-negotiable for me, at least, because it doesn't cause me to run a humidifier longer than what I need, and it cuts on and cuts off on its own. I don't have to do anything or think about it. And that is great for a plant parent that typically, like myself, we're busy. We don't have time to constantly fill a humidifier or run it all the time. It can be a lot. So having that automatic sensor is going to be your best friend. Now, if you buy a humidifier without the automatic sensor, you can still manage to keep the humidity constant in your room that you're growing your plants in. One, by getting a hygrometer so you can measure the percentage of humidity in the room and you're not guessing and wondering how long to run the humidifier. You can just always have a read on it and then run it however long you need to. But if you're looking for a time in terms of how long to run it every day, I would say several hours. 4 to 6 hours is probably just fine. You're going to find yourself, though, constantly doing that without the sensor, at least in my experience, which is why I always invest in humidifiers that have that, so that, again, I'm not running it more than I need to and then having to fill it up more than I want to. And speaking of filling up, the other thing that I look for is a large tank capacity. You want a humidifier that can hold a lot of water so that you're not constantly refilling. Please learn from me. I have had all sorts of humidifiers over the years, and the one thing that I absolutely hate, and honestly that makes it hard to keep up with keeping a humidifier running all the time, is having one that I have to constantly refill. If you have a large tank, it usually, depending on how long you're running it or, just your setup, you might be filling it up every 2 to 3 days, sometimes 4, as opposed to every day or sometimes every few hours, depending on what size you get. So look for a large tank capacity. I have one that I believe is either 9 liters. I think that's how they measure the tank size. It's wonderful, okay? Look for the largest that you can afford in your budget. But again, what you're paying on the front end in terms of like investing in a humidifier is going to save you on the back end. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to buy a small humidifier that doesn't necessarily have the sensor or just some of the other features, you're going to be paying for it on the back end. It might be cheap now, but you're going to be paying for it in the time that it's going to take to keep up with that humidifier and keep it running and be effective for your collection or just the room that you're trying to raise the humidity. If you invest up front and just spend a little bit extra on some of those features that I mentioned, then you're going to be saving a lot of time on the back end because you're going to have more time to spend with your plants or just do the things that you want to do and not be worrying about if you're giving your plants an optimal environment to grow in. By raising the humidity, you're able to do so. Now, even with the automatic sensor, if you find that your humidifier is constantly running or you just can't seem to raise the humidity in the space or room at all, you're just, trying and trying, you're running it constantly and it's never reaching a certain level, that humidifier might be too small for the size of the room or area that you're trying to raise the humidity in. And a lot of times the humidifiers, when you are buying them, they'll tell you how big of a room, the capacity of which it pumps out the mist to raise the humidity can fulfill. So you get a humidifier that says it can cover up to 500 square feet of a room. Well, now you know that if your room is any bigger than that, it's not going to reach all of the room. It might raise the humidity in one area, but it's not going to do it for the entire room, which may cause you to just buy another humidifier to put maybe on the other side of the room. But that is something to keep in mind, because you don't want to be running a humidifier and it's not doing what you actually want it to do. So make sure that the size that you get matches the room that you are trying to raise the humidity in, or just buying multiples so that you really can cover all of your bases. Now, when it comes to running your humidifiers, how close it should be to your plants is also very important. I always had this misconception that a humidifier should be right up under or above the plants that you're trying to raise the humidity around. I mean, the mist needed to be touching the leaves, and that is furthest from the truth. Honestly, you don't want it to be too close to the plants because it could cause fungal issues. Again, that mist is adding moisture into the air, and a concentrated amount of that is still like putting a whole bunch of water on the leaves. And if there's no airflow, or if it's really humid, it could really cause some issues. So having it a couple of feet away from the plants is totally fine. Having it angled, pointing straight upward is what is going to be best, because humid air sinks to the ground. So you really want it to push up and kind of almost scatter and fall, and really just fill the room with all of that moisture. Because again, the goal is to raise the humidity in the entire room. It's not to make your plants really wet. So to Kaylin and anyone else that has wondered about humidity, I hope you found this video helpful. Office hours are open every Sunday, so be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss out, and I will see you next week.